to witness Governor Ralph Northam signing this into law, calling it Breonna's Law. So joining us to discuss police tactics here in the U.S., retired Baltimore PD Sergeant turned whistleblower and activist Michael Wood. Michael, thanks for being with us today. First, having been a beat cop yourself at one point in your career, would you say that no-knock warrants are dangerous to both the home's occupants and the police serving that warrant?
Well, I mean, it depends on the situation you're talking about. As a general rule, it's very dangerous. I mean, anytime you're doing a raid, it's going to be dangerous at all. I have a big problem personally from when I would do it. It would seem like a lot of times we would go and we would do a raid and bust into a house when there really wasn't a reason to do so. We could have just waited for the suspect to get out. I mean, we have all the time in the world as police officers. So I would rather do those apprehensions on the street and then search the house later. There are exceptions to this, of course, but it seems like whenever we establish something, whether it's racism or it's going after drug dealers, we get these ideas in our head of a word and what it means, and then the vocabulary expands and includes a definition of things that don't matter. So no-knock warrants, when they come in and maybe like if there's a terrorist or a murder suspect that can flush evidence and you need to get this evidence to do something, it's very important. So then it's justifiable, but then it's like the definition expands to, well, if it's terrorism, why not murder? If it's not murder, why not drug dealing? You know, drugs and violence are tied together, so why not do it for these drugs? And then it just expands until everyone was doing it. I did a lot of no-knock warrants, and with the idea that you're even blaming police for it is kind of weird because no-knock warrants are ordered by judges.
That's another angle I think that a lot of people fail to examine. So I think that's a valid point that you bring up, and to not blame the cops, rather to look at the magistrate or the judge. Now, Virginia is 3 out of 50 states to ban these no-knock warrants. And of course, we can't leave out any federal legislation on the matter that hasn't yet been tackled. Breonna Taylor's family is calling on the incoming president to take action on this. Do you have any inclination to believe that Washington will intervene on such legislation?
I don't really think they have a right to intervene. Policing is a local thing, and it's a tactic. Whether you do a no-knock warrant or not is entirely up to the police department itself and to local areas. You're not going to get the FBI to stop doing it. I mean, they're going to think that they're doing real situations. And again, with them, it's also a judge or issuing it to be that way. The judge is saying this is necessary to go ahead and execute this warrant because it has probable cause, and have established that. But I really find that the framing of the entire situation from police reform in the last 4 to 5 years has really changed dramatically. I have to really point out that because you are a victim to police violence doesn't mean you understand police violence or the solutions to police violence. You're actually probably the worst person to suggest something because you've literally been traumatized. And let me just quickly give an example of this thing when it's like it's based on race. All these things are talking about race, like this is going to stop some kind of racial issue. And policing is about systemic racism. It's not about individuals being racist. And let me just point this out real quick, and I got the newest data. So in 2019, blacks went from committing 53% of murders to 56% of murders. That's 8.2 times more murder than everyone else in the United States. And this should mean that black people would be victims to 8.2 times more of police violence, because police respond to violence. They do not respond to demographics. That's a silly idea. That would mean that like 20% of police violence should be committed on children and another 20% should be conducted on the elderly. That's a preposterous idea that has anything to do with it. But last year, there were 249 blacks killed by the police and 405 white people killed by police. That's actually completely flipped upside down on its head. There should be 8.2 times more committed. It's 26%, 26 white unarmed males were killed last year, and 12 black unarmed people were killed last year. All these numbers are exactly backwards. The data it says very clearly that being black means you are 16.4 times less likely to get killed by the police.
think some people listening or watching might argue that proportionally to the racial demographics of the U.S., with African Americans being something like 13% of the population, that this is happening to them more in that sense. But I do understand your point there. But what about the matter of police de-escalation training? Can you give us any insight as to what that is, if any, is taught to young cops at the academy?
You said the right word right there. You said if any. I mean, it's essentially zero. I think I may have had 8 hours of it in the Baltimore Police Academy. And somewhere around 8 hours is about the standard. They might dedicate one day to de-escalation. I think that's gone up in time. Shockingly, a lot of people aren't going to like this data either, and they're not going to understand it. Police violence has gone down dramatically. We were up, when we first started getting data, police killing Americans was around 1,300 to 1,400 people per year. Well, the population has grown. There's more people, there's more cops, there's more incidences, and now we're down to less than 1,000 police killings per year. So there's actually improvements that are going forward, and things are getting better. And I think that we need more de-escalation, but I really think what I focus on is the philosophy of the matter. And I think that de-escalating police the way they are structured now, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But I don't argue that policing should be structured this way. I don't think we should be having armed officers writing traffic tickets, for instance. And so a lot of these things kind of get weird, where, as you can see with even the suggestions that Campaign Zero and Breonna Taylor's parents are making, they're talking about essentially doing DOJ consent decrees. This stuff has been done for decades and has failed every single time that someone has tried to implement it, and it is using the criminal justice system essentially to continue to punish cops, to hold them accountable, to send them to jail. And that's just you being in power of the same system you say you're against. I'm really more interested in changing policing entirely to something that, yeah, when it comes time to kick in a door to get a murderer, yeah, you got to do it, but you shouldn't be doing it, for Breonna Taylor's situation itself. Yeah, we shouldn't have been. Right.
To your point, Michael, you're right. It seems like these incidents are amplified, I think, because of the prevalence of cameras both on the police officer and within the hands of the civilians. I got to leave it right there, though. Michael Wood, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some insight